Okay. So, we're talking about these things. Agreed. But first, before we take note about language labels, right? I say heritage languages because there are two local languages in Louisiana. All right, we can talk about between your ethnic identity and the language that you speak. Sometimes they match, the labels, sometimes they don't, right? I'm going to sometimes talk about Louisiana Creole, the Louisiana Creole language that is sometimes called Kuri. One of the reasons why it's called Kuri is because this is also confusing. The Kuri is one of the historic names for the Louisiana Creole language. And more recently, a lot of activists for that language said, we're tired of like having to specify if we're talking about Louisiana Creole as an ethnicity or the Louisiana Creole language. So we're just calling the language Kuri. Right? It comes from the verbs to go and to come in Kuri. Okay? Go, Kuri, Bini, come, right? And it's different. The Kuri is different than the verb for to go in Louisiana French, so it's a distinctive aspect of it. So sometimes I'm going to talk about Kuri, and what I mean by that is Louisiana Creole. And then sometimes I'm going to talk about Louisiana French, which is also sometimes known as Acadian French. By that, I mean the vernacular or the sort of informal, everyday people French as it's spoken in Louisiana, right? The dictionary, what I call La Bible, the Bible, little b, sorry, you know, but is called the Dictionary of Louisiana French as spoken in Cajun Creole and American Canadian communities, because it's not just the people who speak Louisiana French. But some people prefer the label Cajun French. A Louisiana Creole person, for example, might speak Louisiana French, or they might speak Louisiana Creole, or they might speak both. And similarly, you might have somebody who identifies as Cajun, and so they want to say, like, I speak Cajun French, but if you were to actually talk to them, they are speaking Louisiana Creole, right? They're saying Kuri, they're saying Moge, you know, things that are distinctly Louisiana Creole. It's not that weird. I mean, if you look globally, there are a number of Scandinavian languages that are mutually intelligible. They can absolutely understand each other, but a Norwegian guy does not want to say, I'm speaking Swedish. No, he's speaking Norwegian, you know? So it's not that weird that labels and languages get different. But that's my little basic. I could give an entire 4-hour talk about that, but I'm not. I will say, I do often talk about French in Louisiana, and by that I mean Louisiana vernacular French, the informal French that your mama and your papa talk, Louisiana Creole, Kuri, and also like standard French. Standard French has always existed in Louisiana alongside these languages. It's not a foreign thing. Like, we'll talk more about that later. So I think when people first think about the arts and heritage languages, particularly in our area, immediately we think of traditional music. We think of Cajun music, Southern music, right? So that's an amazing relationship. It's a very symbiotic relationship. And I think it's something that it's hard to find other examples of a relationship that's that strong. Very honestly, they talk about this sometimes about like, why do we not sing Jolie Long in English? Like, if we did, it wouldn't feel like Jolie Long. And like, why? Like, there's plenty of other things that we have kind of switched to English for, but for some reason, with traditional music, a lot of the time people have this desire to keep it in language. And I say it's symbiotic because it works in both directions. There's plenty of people who started learning music, and then it was like, oh, I can figure out what I'm saying. I'm just doing this phonetically. I should probably learn the language. And then vice versa. There's people who learn the language and they're like, I want to do stuff with this. Like, well, there's a lot of music in French and Creole, so I'm going to do that. But apart from traditional music, what else is out there? You know? So let's just talk about a little bit broadening our context for how French and the arts can interact with music. So beyond just traditional music, there's other forms of music, right? I've been speaking on here. There are a recent example. Before speaking, there was Seal down there, their go-go dancers. Before Seal down there in the 70s, there was Toto with their crazy electric guitars and stuff like that. Young people have always wanted to kind of take Louisiana French and Louisiana Creole music and kind of make it their style. They were listening to other genres too, and there's always been some mix in there. Particularly if you don't know them are super fun. They're based on New Orleans, they have roots in Acadiana, and their families, their Christian families, and they do like indie pop. Like if you know Givers from here, like it's kind of like that sort of style. There's drums and like Skylar, his arm like that, you know, he's got a trumpet in one hand and a keyboard in the other. It's like not traditional music by any means in that sense, but they write the lyrics in Louisiana French and in English and sometimes in Franglish, and it's super fun. So here at the top, this is Jesse Bateman, proud moment. Took my class in college when he was but he composes like instrumental classical music. He lives in New Orleans, and it's not that there's words in the music. Most of what he composes is just instrumental, but he gives it names that are representative of his heritage and the things that inspire him. So he just giving names to non-lyrics kind of music. And then this is a really interesting book called Jazz Like Nails. The author came to talk to the White House here a few years ago. Her name is Marguerite. She's from Quebec. And it talks about the Louisiana Creole roots of jazz music and how jazz was in some ways born out of a Creole tradition. If you think about it, what are the big names of early jazz? Delaware Morton. Okay. His last name wasn't actually Morton. That was his stepdad's name, just like his first name wasn't actually Jill. But his last name, I can't remember if it was Moche or something, it was a French name. And Sidney Bechet, as his name would suggest, was from a Creole French-speaking family. He spent a lot of time in France. I've seen older Sidney Bechet on television interviews in France, perfectly comfortable speaking French with French people, you know? And these are like the big names of early jazz. So that's another aspect of culture and language that I find.
This really has a connection, not to cut you off, but Good Hope Hall, I was in Freetown, many of those Creole musicians played there. On Stewart Street is Louisiana, which is going on in Marshall.
What was the name of it?
It's called Good Hope.
Good Hall. What was the name?
Jazz music.
They need to play
jazz heritage of the 20s and 30s. It was a jazz scene. Many of the Creole musicians would play here. Louis Armstrong would come to Lafayette very often and play there as well. And it still stands. So yeah, even Lafayette has a history that ties to the Creole.
And I mean, you know, jazz in Liberia, Bob Johnson, you know, a lot of back and forth. This is really interesting. This is a nonprofit in New Orleans called French and Creole, and they revive productions of largely 19th century operas that were written by people of color. Largely, they focus on people of color in New Orleans, and a lot of these are French operas. This is one example of kind of one day. This is one of his comedies, François. And they redo these productions these days. And then they could not find enough work in Louisiana to be exiled himself more or less to France. And he wrote a lot of later works in France and died in France. His doesn't live in France. He married a French woman because he had better opportunities there at the time. He couldn't get people to do his work here. Because they really recently teamed up with a DC organization called Opera Lafayette, actually, but they are doing his big magnum opus called Acadiana, and it's like 600 pages, and it was found in a drawer somewhere. It's kind of like a kind of 1001 Nights or something like that, kind of a little bit of Arabian kind of inspirations and stuff, but there's a lot of like unearthed history there that organization Opera Creole is putting out there now. In terms of film and media, there's something called the French Culture Film Grant, which started maybe 7 or 8 years ago. It's a grant, $25,000 grant for a short film, either a short narrative or a documentary. It can be a long documentary or short. And it's been going on for 6 or 7 years. We have about 6 or 7. The most recent one just premiered this month at the New Orleans French Film Fest. And this is one that So here, and around here in Lafayette, with Lafayette people like Allison Boldy-Hart, who was the producer, lived on the long term bar, right? That particular story is the story of it's a narrative, and it's the story of a young Haitian immigrant who moves to the United States, moving to the area, and ends up working at the home health aide for hospice, stuff like that, and have a conversation with an old Haitian woman, and they kind of discover things about themselves. This right here, now, I came to Southern Street to see it. It's just about, and it's not part of this grant or anything, but it's just a whole, it's just a short narrative horror film, all Louisiana French. And Corey Saint-Edouard did it. And then put a picture of Glenn Pete here. He just won an award at the Rogers Prize. And he's just one example of a large number of documentarians and culture fairs, culture preservers who he's recorded so many just field recordings of talking to an old person and telling me a story about Louis. Or and so he's given so much to archives and stuff like that, and that sort of documentary is an art form too. They say it's talking about creative writing. So there's a French language or heritage language, let's say. They do things not in French too. Publishing house based out of Centenary College in Shreveport. They don't do English. But anything else, they'll do if it's got some sort of vague tie to Louisiana. Mostly though, they either redo editions of historic Louisiana works. So Lake Now was the first collected anthology of poetry written by Americans in the United States. It was written by free Creole color who were very educated. It's a beautiful, poetic standard of national French, right? And it came out in 1845. It was published. This was the editor of it. This right here, this is clearly a different edition. It's not the 10th edition, but I just wanted y'all to see a picture of Alfred Mercier, who was a doctor by trade, but he grew up in a rich family, plantation owning family, and he wrote a story about plantation, somewhat inspired by his childhood and what he observed. And it's probably one of the biggest novels of 19th century Louisiana. It's interesting too, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. In it, he has multiple characters, and some of the characters speak Creole. They speak what I'm going to refer to as Swahili, and so he just has their dialogue in Creole. You know what I mean? So the book itself is in maybe standard French. But when a character that speaks Creole is speaking, he writes out their dialogue in Creole, which is just an interesting way of kind of like working through the diversity of language. These two over here are two examples of newer publications. So that's another thing that Tentamar does. They publish new works in the heritage languages in Louisiana. So this was the was a big deal. I think he was the first Louisianian to win like a major literary prize from the Acadiana process, which is a big. I don't even know how to describe the Academy process. You don't know it. It's been around since Richelieu. The Cardinal Richelieu, Three Musketeers, founded the Academy process. They call themselves Les Immortels, the Immortals, and they wear big black robes. It's fancy. Let's just say it's fancy. And they from the British Parish, now living in Lafayette, a literary prize for this collection of poetry that is written in his French. Baby over here is a collection of poetry entirely in Quoddy. The whole book is in Quoddy. Like the descriptions in Quoddy. There might be some of the publication tiny print in English, I don't know, maybe, but it's all in Quoddy. It's also a collective anthology. So there's multiple people submitting their poem, and they put it all together as a Quoddy. That picture's not there. Anyway, in the top corner, there was a picture of a new book that just came out this year called Écoutons by Alford. I think they did a thing here maybe with And I just love that because Lava's like a great example. I think he's Gen Z. It feels like a very Gen Z thing. And I decided I just love Gen Z because they're like, I'm not made. Because I'll tell you something. I do creative stuff, like creative writing, stuff like that in French, but it took me forever to think that that was something I could or should do. I was like, no, I can be perfect. And we'll talk more about this later. I was like, no, I gotta like get to perfection level French and like, I don't even know what it was, but like love that like Gen Z, they're like, okay, I'm here. Like nobody's perfect. Like no, this is not a thing. Like what I mean is that Lyle started learning French maybe, I don't know, several years before, but not. I started learning French when I was 14, and I don't think I wrote anything for like at least 12 years. You know what I mean? Really intensely majored in it, like you know, no, I should just like read things. It's fine. And I love that. I see this a lot in. I see it with people raising their kids even. It's like awesome. It's like no, do something right now. And we'll talk more about that later. But I just love Lyle. He's like an inspiration to me. I think he's amazing. And it just came out. And he was just saying, he was like, nobody's writing what I want to read. I want to write this. And it's like very specific. He's like, nobody's doing it. I'm going to do it. It's fun. As far as another publishing house, Go Press does publish in French as well. They do some, I think it is missing multiple pictures here. I'm very confused. They do some, but we have two examples, two basic examples. They do some academic stuff. Like that's like just like an anthology of writing for hundreds of years in Louisiana, from the arrival of like explorers to present day to song lyrics by Armstrong, all of it, kind of academic way. And then you do like poetry and children's books and things like that. The book of Zachary Richard poetry. Hope there's not but theater. I wish that I was not either not born or tiny route. I wish I was born in 1984, so I could have seen the Shaggy, and in 1982, so I could have seen La Table. These are plays by a group called the Catching. They wrote plays collectively. So I think the Shaggy was specifically a contest. They already had a number of pretty successful plays, and they just told the public, send us your play idea. And we'll maybe, tweak it to our preferences, because they always kind of work collectively and said, well, I think I should say it this way. But, and this man sent this idea of a play about a couple that had gotten divorced and was getting remarried to the same two people. And then, like, people come to do a shagabadi, when you go and make noise outside a newlywed couple's house the night of their wedding, and they have to invite you in. It's like a tradition thing, but they get the day wrong. They think they're getting married on this day, and it turns out they're getting married on this day, and so it's like this totally fun. All these plays are available. We don't have subtitles, sadly. I want someone to do that. I'm trying to convince someone to do that. But they're all available on LPD's archives. So you can watch these plays online. There's, I don't know, 15, 20, like that. And then also, another interesting picture. There was a picture of her Jean here. And there was, but there have been a lot of youth theater efforts in recent years. First with Acadiana, and now Wonderland has kind of taken that under the umbrella of getting immersion kids to do plays. I went and saw, it was at Wonderland a few years ago, like a Christmas Carol, but it was in Louisiana, French, and I can't remember the name for Ebenezer Scrooge, but it was something kind of Louisiana-y and stuff. It was really fun. And that gives the kids something to do. Well, this is a picture of the play that's happening here on Thursday. On the 20th, Portrait of La Villa. Simone, as far as I understand, there's going to be super titles, like an opera, like up, like above the stage. There's super titles because it's in French. So I guess the Nina Simone songs are probably in English. But, I've been told it's kind of hard to tribute on part, but it is from a theater company in France. Visual arts. This is a mural I found some people to pay POZ to do. It's got a song lyric on it from Alex on it, and And then, so you can either have graphic stuff, you know, where the text is incorporated into the art, or like Marguerite is a exhibition that came out maybe in 2018-ish called Mythologie Louisianaise, and there's been subsequent like iterations of it, versions of it. But when it first came out, it was 2018 or so, and it was very culturally inspired, and they did all of the book that goes with it multilingually. So I'm like an expert in visual arts, I'm not gonna lie, but I understand there's like books that go with the visual arts exposition, so they did all the text for that. And we've done, there's been exhibits here with the text for just the exhibit on the wall is multilingual, you know, it's in English, French, that's another way that you can incorporate language into the visual art. This is the big question marks. Because, and I don't know, and I know there's one thing that's weird, like, I don't really know how you incorporate language into dance. These are things I've seen. Okay, obviously, we have social dance here in Acadiana, this area, where like you partner dance that I feel sorry for people who grow up other places and don't dance like that because it's the best, right? It's just something we do, right? So there's that, but it's not really, other than listening to the lyrics, the language is there. I did a poem during Femme 2, which was a multidisciplinary show here in 2022. And this was not my idea, but like they got this young dancer to dance to the poem. So we could do like a physical, but other than that, I'm open to ideas for like how dance is also language. That one's harder. I tried to go through all the art forms, and I was like, dance.
I saw a ballet in the house a couple of years ago, and it was a play and ballet and a story. It was everything combined, and there was a lot of language in it besides just the ballet.
It's funny enough mentioning ballet, like, you know, obviously we took ballet, and it was all the words French, right? And then you like plie, and right, you know, all that. It's all French, so it gets into that as well. Okay, this is a picture of a YouTube video you can find on YouTube. It's something we made in 2020. It's an animated explainer video, and it's Quoi c'est le Louisiana? What is Louisiana French? And it's just a little old man who tells you about French, but in it, I made a mistake, right? So I want to be clear that mistakes happen. Like, anytime you're making stuff, like it might not be perfect, including the language aspect of it might not be perfect, right? So in this, I was trying to show like, okay, so there's things that are distinct about Louisiana French, but there's also a lot that's the same thing. And so I have like a Quebecois person and a French person and a Louisiana person, and they're like, well, like, how do you say the left foot? They're all like, the pied gauche, like, yeah, sure, like, it's all the same. It's no different word for left foot in Louisiana than it is in France. And then there's one thing I was like, how do you say like last Thursday? And I was like, jeudi passé, and I had the French say jeudi passé, and he didn't really know because he was just reading it off of the thing, so he didn't understand the context. And then they don't really say jeudi passé, which the French people of the world have alerted me to. Don't worry, they're like, no, we say jeudi dernier, which is true. They don't say Thursday past, they say Thursday last, right? Here's the deal. That doesn't bother me that much when I mess up the standard French. When I get so used to Louisiana French, I'm like, yeah, they say that too, actually. Why do 68 million of them say, no, we don't say that? We don't have 68 million speakers to be like, no, that's wrong, right? So that's part of why accurate representation matters, because there's not as many people to say like, no, that's a typo, or that's wrong, or that's, you know, there's not as many people, and so you can just kind of spread false ideas because there hasn't been that. There's no one on YouTube. There's not that many people on YouTube. There's a few. I know a few, but there's not that many people on YouTube who have like a lot of expertise in dialectology, Louisiana Creole, Louisiana French. You're like, no, it's not this, right? So that's why we really have to be careful here. So I just got some examples that are not Louisiana. There are language fails, like within a few blocks of this building. But I'm not gonna talk about that because I'm not here to shame Louisianians. I love Louisianians, I know we're all doing this. But here's some language fails. So, this is the easiest one right here. This is in Bulgarian. What is this on the right? What are they saying? Business part, right? You know, it's in Soviet Bulgaria. I was like, okay, not so great on the spelling, but sure. I think, I imagine there might be some French speakers who know what this is supposed to say.
Fruits and vegetables.
Well, fruits and vegetables, but no, that's actually, I could say, because sometimes they leave off the, I could say that they were trying to say that in French. It's not, I'm not entirely clear, but particularly this up here, alcohol and stranger wine.
It's foreign.
Yeah, imported wine, foreign wine. And then they just didn't put an H in alcohol because they don't have an H in alcohol, so. And then my favorite here, this is in Canada, someone who's like, oh, I have to put French on it because this is going to Canada. All right, Google translate that. And police sauces, which also sounds a little bit inappropriate to me. That is Polish sausage. Polish the sausage, not Polish. When you see a product or a sign or a slogan with this kind of error, say in English, what is your reaction? Yeah, they kind of laugh at it. You don't take it seriously. You know, like it's not a good reaction, right? I mean, hopefully we can all show each other some grace. English is not an easy language to learn. It's really complicated and doesn't stay the same at all. But it does make you not take it as seriously, and it seems kind of not great, right? So, oh no, did I skip anything? No, I didn't. Okay. So, but I see a lot of things like this online, right? Coude, couillon, right? Rode, right? Which is just like, I don't know, I'm just gonna decide how to spell it. But the fact of the matter is, like, there are ways to spell that. I do want to be clear though, that this right here is not what I'm talking about. This right here is a letter from an older woman. I don't know when she wrote it. I want to say probably like the 80s or something, 70s, 80s. Her daughter had moved to Texas and she wanted to write a letter to her daughter and she wanted to write it in her language. And she didn't have any access to education in her language. She had a French catechism book because Catholic Church, and it's standard French that, you know, the Catholic Church does one thing, right? It's going to be the same thing everywhere. So she had a French catechism book and she kind of taught herself to read and write with this catechism book. So if you were just to look at this without that context, you might be like, oh, the spelling error, that's like a weird way to spell this, or that's a weird, you know what I mean? But like in context, like I have zero, I think this is beautiful. This is amazing. This is a woman who's trying with the resources that she has to express herself writing wise in her language. And it's like it makes me all like, you know, emotional about it. But I think we have to keep, and I always try and keep in mind what was possible for my grandmother and my great grandmother versus what's possible for me and for my daughter. So I just decided not to look up how to, I have the internet, right? But I just decided I don't want to Google that, right? You know, like that's a pretty different scenario than what this woman is doing. Very different scenario. Now, we also have, even better than that, we have other resources. Here it is. Okay, I'm probably doing this out of order. So if you go and you look up boudet on Google, it'll give you boudet. That is boudet, B-O-U-D-E-R, 2 pound, 2 sulk, right? And it's the same thing in France. This is a French dictionary, the standard French dictionary. And there's no reason why we can't spell it that way, right? They pronounce it boudet. If you click on that little button, you would hear a little Frenchman go boudet. You know what I mean? Like it's the same thing, right? And first off, I know people will be like, but like, I want our French. I encounter a lot of people who are like, I don't want standard French. I want our French. Standard French has been in Louisiana since the beginning, right? These are newspaper headers from the 18th century. There was a French language newspaper in just about every parish of Louisiana, every corner of Louisiana, French language newspaper. And everyone's like, it's just a written language. It's just an oral language in Louisiana. Nobody knew how to read and write. I'm like, who was reading the newspapers? If there were nobody reading in French, why were newspapers being printed in French? Now, the newspapers are written in a fairly standard French. There might be like a word here and there that's kind of more local-y, but they're newspapers. They're written like newspapers are written. Because at that point, if you got any education, it was probably in French. That was what you were learning to read and write in the 1800s a lot of the time, right? Our 1845 Constitution was published in both French and in English. And the French that it was published in was like legalese fancy standard French because it's a constitution, right? It's not song lyrics. It's not a conversation with your partner. It's a constitution. So it's formal. So I don't want people to think that like standard French is something we've imported recently and whatnot. And I understand why people do. I've heard some things about what went down in the 70s, but it's always been here, standard French. And it just used to be that French was in all these different domains. And as English took over all these other domains, we kept French just with these very personal things, you know, dancehall song lyrics, talking to your auntie, stuff like that. And so we start to only associate that kind of language with French in Louisiana. This is a picture of this book. Sorry, guys. It's a picture of this book. And the editors were a mixture of like academic linguists who are good at writing dictionaries and Louisiana language experts. So Barry Jean Oslet, Amanda LaFleur, and the late Richard Guidry, who people say was a walking dictionary. He just knew the name for every plant and every animal and everything, right? And they had to kind of come up with solutions for, okay, if we're gonna write Louisiana French, we're gonna write our French, what does it look like? How do we spell things? It's very comprehensive. Now, a lot of people talk about the dictionary that Father Degg made in the 1980s, which is a really awesome dictionary. And everything that's in that dictionary is in this dictionary too. Father Degg was one person, you know, so he had the limitations of being one person and being in kind of one area of the state, whereas this whole team sourced from every French-speaking area of the state. So it's just a little bit more comprehensive. And it also is written using basically a French orthography or a French writing system. So it's written like standard French in the sense of a French person could read it. They might not know what that word means, but they would know how to read it.
So I have been told that before the interstate came through, all of the communities had their own words for things. So
That's still
is somehow made it into a standard Louisiana French.
I mean, so if you ask somebody like one of my mentors, Amanda LaFleur, she would say, okay, we say Louisiana French, really it's Louisiana Frenches. There's a lot of shared stuff. There is some strong variation in certain corners, like Terrebonne and Lafouche have a lot of distinct aspects to their French. Boyles has a lot of distinct aspect to their French. But the nice thing about this dictionary is that, and we'll see in a second, they try to account for all the variation that they can. And that's still the case. The variation is still there. I had a gentleman call me this morning, I want to say, from Boyles, and he was asking about la veille, which here would be la veille. When you do the veille and you visit with people on your porch in the evenings, well, in the Boyles, they call it la veille. They don't call it veille.
International parish.
So, as an example, this is what an entry looks like in that dictionary. You've got a head word, right? All the way on the left. That's like the entry is under that. It's under that spelling, etc. And then right next to it, you have all these alternative spellings. Now, why would those alternative spellings be there? Because there are lots of ways to pronounce it, right? All this stuff in the brackets to the right is various pronunciations, right? And they're using the International Phonetic Alphabet, which we call IPA. If you love language, like go learn it, it's super fun. I like it much more than like the weird dictionary long A with a line over it. That doesn't feel intuitive. The International Phonetic Alphabet just says every sound in human language, we're gonna give it a symbol. And then that way, like every sound has its own symbol. Like, so there are some symbols that we will never use in English because that sound doesn't exist in the English language. But it's cool. So this you could pronounce it. All right, I'm gonna try. I feel a little rusty. You could say refroidir, refroidir, Arfroidir, Rafroidir, Rafaldir, Rafredir, Rafredir. I mean, like, these are all different ways you can pronounce this. And that's why there's multiple spellings, because if you pronounce it more like this, then maybe you want to kind of spell it more like that. And then finally, you get example sentences in this book. Even funner, they're things people actually said. I cracked up this book because it's stuff like quarrelsome. Thank God my wife isn't quarrelsome. Or like, it's just like an old man said that. You know what I mean? It's just like random, like cousin Tutoon. I'm like, yeah, there's a cousin Tutoon, of course. You know what I mean? Like, it's just totally random. They're not like C-spot run, you know, Brian is in the kitchen, you know, like it's not, it's like things people actually said. As a way to note, they put in small caps English words. I'm saying English words because there are some of these words that are in the dictionary, like truck or gone or back, like get back, revient back, you know? And they put them in caps, they're like, yeah, we know that's English, but it's like, it's incorporated itself into our language at this point. And then they have these real example sentences always with the English translation. So it's great for learners. No.
Maggie, real quick, can you go back to that previous slide? In the parentheses, is that the F and the TG, is that the where it was recorded?
Yes, that's where this example sentence was recorded or taken from. If you look at the beginning, they have like all the codes, and I'll get into some codes, like I'm not gonna get every code. So they have source codes too, sometimes. This one doesn't look like it has any source codes. We might see more source codes in a second if the pictures stay. But yeah, so TB is Terrebonne, BM is Vermilion, you know, SN is I think Saint Martin, Saint Martin, stuff like that. But really important to know that with this dictionary, the English to French side is structured very differently than the French to English side. We just looked at the French to English side. The English to French side, they just call it a glossary. They don't even call it a dictionary. It's much shorter and it's much less detailed. And this was a picture of, I literally took a picture of dress on the English to French side. So you would have seen that there's the adjective dress, which is pour propre, which is like you dress clothes, you know what I mean? Like fancy clothes. And then there's the noun dress, like what a woman might wear. And then there's dress, the verb to dress yourself, things like that. So you have to first of all make sure you're getting the right part of speech, right? You don't want to use a verb when you want as a noun. And then even in the nouns, this gives you three things straight away under the nouns. When you look at dress, it says cotillon, robe, or mini. So then you have to go back into the French side. You can't just pick them at random because they're not in order of like what is the most said or anything like that. They're in order kind of alphabetically. It's like an algorithm that when they were making the dictionary, it's complicated. It's not about the most normal word for dress, because the most normal word for dress is not cotillon, even if that comes first on the English to French side, right? And you can figure this out by you just go back on the other side and you look up cotillon. You go, okay, it means either dance or dress. Like, oh, cotillion, yeah, okay, cotillion dance makes sense. And then you look up mimi and you see, oh, it's baby talk for dress. Okay, so it's like a baby talk word for dress. Cool. Note that an M and an F mean that it's either masculine or feminine. If you all had any French in school or whatever, you know, keep that in mind. And then if you look up robe, you'll see this giant entry, right? Lots of examples and other variations. And so I think we can safely say that this is the normal word for dress, like a dress that a person would wear, right? But I love this book as a physical book. I have multiple copies, but the digital version is amazing. And this is why. Let me explain to you why. Because if you have example sentences and you have a search function, you can see all these different examples. You don't like if you just have this, you can only really look up the word dress. You can only look up the word robe, right? And you'll look it up alphabetically, okay, robe, and you'll just see that. But it might be used in an example sentence for blue. You know, maybe somebody has a blue dress and the word robe might be in that sentence, but it might not be under the head word robe, right? Does that make sense? Like, if you go look up, you can't find, it would take so much time, it would be impossible to find every example of robe, but with computers you can, and a PDF, you just go up in that top corner, right here, this is a PDF, right? And you go to that top corner, find text or tools, and I type what I want to see examples of. It also works for verbs because verbs change. So, all right, maybe I want, so the verb to be, right, is être, to be, but then je, tu es, il est, vous êtes, right? It changes a lot, just like in English. I say, I am, you are, he is, like, it totally changes. But you can find the root of the verb and kind of put that in there if you want to see it in different forms. The digital version, you can either buy it, or if you have a library card, they generally have, like at the Lafayette Public Library, they have at least one that you can digitally check out. Also, if you're at the university, if you're a student at all, if you have access to that, I think maybe Scribd can give you access, and you can download it to off Scribd if you have a university membership of some sort. So now we can see hundreds of examples of the word robe, and I just took two. This one's from Brasson de Couche Couche, the song. CH means chanson, so it's from the song Brasson de Couche Couche, that example of the song. If you look at the word house, just to give you another example, it will say in this order: Cambuse, habitation, maison debout, maison. So now we're going to go back to the other side, and we have to look up these words. Cambuse, right? It says building, house, et toujours dans la cambuse, to remain cooped up in the house. You're like, well, it kind of sounds like house. But then if you go back up to your little search function, one of two, there are two examples of the word cambuse in this side of the dictionary. And they are both in that entry, right? Over here, we're gonna look up habitation, farm, plantation, farmstead. Okay, I'm getting some rural vibes here. Like it's kind of a plantation or a homestead or a farmstead. Okay, so maybe if you want that kind of connotation to your word for house, then maybe you use it. I've got 8 examples. That's doing a little bit better. Over here, maison debout, there's one example, and it's under maison, which has 472 examples. So I think we know which one is the normal word for house. For Cordy dictionaries and Cordy orthography, the writing system, there was a dictionary that was made by the same people, or at least some of the same people who made this dictionary. The first one they made was the Dictionary of Louisiana Creole in the late 90s. At the time it was made, and it was just a physical book, and then it became really hard to find it for a while, but now you can download it for free. Oh no, I think I put that, but I think you have to test if you can just do this free trial and get it off, but I meant to test to see if that works. But also, there's a thing to note about this, which is at that time, they had to come up with this idea of how do we write this. Now, Louisiana French, they decided we're going to write it the same way French writes things, the standard French language. We're going to use their way of writing out sounds. The simplest way to describe this is CH, right? CH in English makes a ch sound. It does not make that sound in French. If you think about chien, a dog, it's a sh sound. It's not a ch, it's a sh. So that's what I'm saying when I mean like the sound system and the writing system like that. For this dictionary, they said, well, Creole languages throughout the world, because Creole is a type of language, right? Jamaican Creole is a language that is more related to English, just like Haitian Creole or Louisiana Creole are languages that are more related to French. So they said Creole languages are generally written phonetically. They have a more phonetic writing system. But they took the phonetics of French, because most other Creole languages that are related to French in the world are living alongside French as the big fancy language, right? They're generally living in a situation where like maybe the language of government is French, but a lot of the people speak Creole, right? So that's a thing to note, because later on, in the mid-2010s, there was a group of activists that came up with a new writing system, because they said, well, in Louisiana, Creole speakers are not living in a world where the government is in French and school is in French and they're learning to read and write in French. They're living in a world where that's all happening in English. So they have the English kind of sound system and writing system already in their head. So we should have that a little bit more in mind whenever we're developing a writing system. Sometimes that doesn't totally work because some sounds exist in one language that don't exist in another language, but they more turned it towards English, and then they kind of came up with symbols for sounds that don't exist in English. That you can get this, you can download it as a PDF. If that link is too complicated, you can just go to my LHCB. I think it's Louisiana Historical and Cultural Vistas is what that stands for, mylhcb.com. And then there's also this great book called the French and Creole. It's a sort of primer of, beginner's guide to Louisiana Creole to CODOFIL. It's available as a Google site, or if you want like a physical copy, you can buy that off Amazon. If you go to the site, it will also, glossary will get you to this webinary dictionary. One thing to be careful with, if you try to use this webinary dictionary, I do this all the time. I don't know why, I keep forgetting that this works this way. If you go and you type, I want to know the Creole word for water, and you type water, Louisiana Creole, it'll go like, no results. You're like, come on, there's gotta be a word for water. But it's just, that's not what it likes you to do. It wants you to say water, English. This is an English word, water. Click, and it'll give you the Louisiana Creole. So that's just the thing to keep in mind. Just go to. I have half a picture. So there are French tables and Creole tables in Louisiana. That's the New Iberia French table right there. That's a picture of the CODOFIL counter. If you go to codofil.org/tables, that's a screenshot of that. It's supposed to be there. And it's just like a Google Calendar that I try to keep it accurate, but it's somewhat dependent on them telling me if they've changed days or changed locations or whatever. But that way it's all in one spot. And I generally put the town first, so Basile, French table at the library, Saint-Martin, Saint Martinville, La Table Chantante, this day, this time, details. One thing to note, this probably shouldn't be your first foray into learning French. Like, there's people who've done this, particularly because they wanted to learn Louisiana French. They're like, they weren't aware that there were a lot of resources. So they just go to a French table and they're like, I'm here, let's go. And they don't have any French or anything. And the best story I've ever heard about this, my name is, somebody did this. And the older gentleman said, baby, because she kept just being like, what's that? What's this word? Can you tell me what that is? What blah, blah, blah. She wasn't really capturing much. It was constantly interrupting in English. Baby, go learn you some regular French first, and then come back and we'll tell you about the difference. So I just mean, they are very open to learners. They're very welcoming, these tables, but they have different kind of formats, and some of them are just like an excuse to get together and chit chat. They're not a lesson at all. And so they're there because they want to speak French. So if you're just coming at them like, tell me the word for this, English, 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 they're gonna be like, what? This is not what this is about. So what do you do? Well, during the pandemic, during the lockdowns, I got bored, and me and my coworker built a site that just points people in the direction of things that they can go to learn French. It's codofil.org/learn, or you can just go to louisianafrench.org, and it's got resources for total beginners or basically beginners, and then more continuing learners, we call them. And it basically has just entries for all these different things: YouTube channels, children's books, free downloadable PDFs.
I was gonna add, I talked to Kirby recently because the PDFs were only on his Facebook group, and they were like not approving new requests to the Facebook group. So if you can put the PDFs somewhere on there,
I will.
that would be great, because we can't get them otherwise unless we like know Kirby and are like.
Okay, yeah, I'll ask Kirby for the PDFs and I'll just put them underneath.
And I might have them because my mom has them, but yes, please put them up because.
So every resource that's on the site is going to have little tags that say either instructional or media. Instructional means they're like kind of actively teaching you stuff about the language, right? This is like an actual lesson about Louisiana French that Kirby is giving you. He's going to talk to you about verb conjugations or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's a real lesson feel kind of thing. Media just means we're trying to expose you to the language, because anyone who's learning, those are kind of the two things you need. You need a little bit of structure, because we are not 3-year-old children who are just absorbing everything and like, it's not the way you learn your first language, a second language, right? But that's also good because you have a brain and you know how certain things work and you're like, okay, I can figure this out a little bit better than when you're learning your first language and it's just all kind of coming in and you're just absorbing stuff. So instructional versus media, is it just kind of like a children's book where like, okay, it's a simple language, I should be able to follow it. That's media, you know, you're just absorbing it versus actual lesson kind of stuff. Is it for beginners or for continuing learners? Louisiana means it is Louisiana centric in some way. So some of these things will be like, there's like a video of this cute little old couple that I put subtitles on, that I found on YouTube, put subtitles on, and they're just like being adorable, and they're like talking Louisiana French to each other, you know. I think he's from Vermilion and she's from Iberia, and they're the cute little old couple. And so that's like, you know, old people talking their native Louisiana French, right? And then I also am going to put this tag on like a blog started by young Louisianians who have kind of reappropriated the language for themselves, including Louisiana aspects of the language. Now, is that blog going to feel like the exact same Louisiana French as the two old people talking to each other? Maybe not, but like that's where it's going, because the younger generations are going to be people who shape this language going forward. And they are very proudly doing this as Louisianians. So that's what Louisiana means. That it's somehow Louisiana created, Louisiana centric, or, you know, in a Louisiana variety of French or Creole.
What's being taught in the school within standard French, the immersion programs here now? What's being taught? Standard French?
Yes, school French, basically. It's just like we learn school English, you learn school French. Now, there are resources that we are making and have made, like this is something we gave to every teacher in French immersion for their classroom. And it's flashcards that have 51 words that are a little bit different in Louisiana. And on the back, they have the Louisiana French word, the standard French word, the Louisiana Creole word, and the English word. And then they have a cute picture on the front as flashcards. So we do, you know, we are making resources for that, but overwhelmingly, you know, most of the teachers are more familiar with standard French, either because they're international associate teachers, or even just, you know, there's not that many native speakers who are still working and teaching, you know. I know some new native speakers who did become French teachers, but like they're retired now, you know, they're older. But Kirby is a teacher in French immersion, you know. So the teachers who are Louisianians, I know they do try and incorporate that somewhat, but the materials they're using are going to be in a more standard French generally. And then basically you get a description of it, and then you can just click on this button to go to the YouTube channel, or to download the PDF, or to whatever the resource is. That's how you access. So this had two things, three things actually. So this is one example where it's like a website that reads children's stories like Chicken Little and stuff like that, and you know, Little Red Riding Hood type of fairy tales. It reads them out loud in French to you. This was the Memrise deck. Memrise is like a language learning app, and they, for a time, allowed people to. They still do. It's just more complicated now. There's notes about it in there, but you could create your own deck. And so years ago, Adrienne Guillory Chapman and some others created a deck for basic CODOFIL. And so it's like a, you know, space repetition, flashcards and little exercises like an app. And it's for CODOFIL, but it's made by activists. I can't remember what one the top was. Yeah, sorry, it should be a picture up there. So it's called Memrise. If you go on the Louisiana French site and the codofil.org/learn louisianafrench.org, it'll be in a little entry like this one. It'll say like Memrise decks for CODOFIL or something like that. It's tricky because Memrise restructured, but I made notes about that in the entry for it, that now you have to, and I changed the link. So unfortunately now you can't get it on your phone anymore, but you can still get it on the internet. Y'all, why can't I have any pictures? I work so hard for my pictures for y'all. This is a picture. I'm glad I put labels on things, otherwise she's staring at this going like, I don't know what that's a picture of. So more recently, on the subject of what you're talking about, we've had some collaborations with LPB. So we have a 7-part web series that came out last year, and I think we maybe put the last one out in early January of this year, with Ryan Langley, who is one of these young Louisianians, proud son of Bayou Pigeon, now teaches fourth grade at Myrtle Place Elementary. Spent a lot of time with his grandparents growing up, really absorbed their French a lot. And he teaches fourth grade now. And so there's him, and there's Amanda LaFleur, who's one of the co-editors of this book, board member of CODOFIL, longtime activist, amazing human being. And they kind of co-host this show where they do, like, you watch a clip of something, maybe a minute and a half of something, that is either a song, a fieldwork recording of an audio recording of someone telling a story, something authentically Louisiana. And then they discuss and they say, oh, you might have noticed, she says, blah, blah, blah. And if you took French in school, you might have learned blah, 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 right? And here's the difference between those two things. And this is the rule for how we use this word in Louisiana, or here's where it comes from. They kind of give context or stuff like that. And the point of it, the reason why we have Ryan as the co-host is because he's actively teaching in Louisiana. So at the end of every episode, they say, okay, Ryan, what can you take back from what we learned today and kind of insert it into how you run your classroom and how you talk with your students. So you can find that title Louisiana at lpp.org, or if you go to LPP's YouTube. And all of them are all available now. And coming soon, there's going to be a second series. It's all filmed. It's all mostly edited, but we're still working on a few things. Kodivini 101, which is going to be focusing on Kodivini. That one is kind of more just like introductory lessons and historical context. And for that, we worked with not only LPB, but also Cliff Saint-Laurent and Chambo, which is a nonprofit. And if you are interested in getting involved with stuff for Louisiana Creole, for Kodivini, I would highly suggest going to chambo.org. That was a logo for them. But they're really, like, in a lot of ways, they're very much boots on the ground for Kodivini and for that language. They're doing a lot of stuff. Scholarships. So I put this as a last thing, resources wise. Okay, yeah, okay. Scholarships, I put this as a last thing, resources wise, because I don't want it to be your first step in learning French. The number of times I have heard someone say, I'm going to go to St. Anne's one day, and I'm like, what are you doing right now? Like, you're going to wait till you go to St. Anne's? I taught at St. Anne's, right? And I can tell you, if you show up and you're the very first level, you can learn amazing things, right? It's amazing. You can learn amazing things at that very first level. The people who, well, I mean, I did this guy's speaking test, and he went and he was like, you're supposed to say what you knew the word for, and he pointed to computer and said computadora, and that was it. And I was like, that's not the word, baby, but it's okay. He had nothing, right? By the end of it, he's like, hey, how's it going? You know, like, you can do amazing things from zero, but you can do even more amazing things if you come in with at least a little bit of a base, because then every time you're hearing words, you're catching a lot more. You know what I mean? You're surrounded by it. So don't wait for an immersion opportunity to actually, like, get yourself going and learning stuff. Because the further your base is, the further along it is, the more you're going to get out of that immersion opportunity.
All I ever heard about St. Anne's was that if you say one English word, they kick you back home.
No.
If you do that 3 times and you're caught 3 times and they take you in 3 times, you know, you get warnings. But it's true. If you do that repeatedly, you will get kicked out. There are a limited number of virtual scholarships too. If you're like, I can't go away for a summer or whatever, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. There are virtual scholarships that you can get in touch with us about. They're in the guide, the scholarship guide as well. And also, speaking of classes, Alliance Française, somebody was saying they had taken classes with Alliance Française. A lot of people associate Alliance Française with, like, France and Europe and stuff like that. But the local Alliance Française, both the one here in Lafayette and the one in New Orleans, are quite Louisiana friendly, in the sense that, like, Ryan is teaching a beginner's Louisiana French class. They sometimes offer Kodivini classes. I think the one in New Orleans is currently offering a Kodivini class. I don't know if it's online or not for New Orleans. So that would probably make a difference to someone here. But funding opportunities. That was a picture of Richard Idri. He is one of those 3 Louisianians who worked on this dictionary, the one that I said was like a walking dictionary. He died in 2008, and they made a memorial fund with the Community Foundation of Acadiana. And that fund, you can apply for funding for projects that involve Cajun and Creole language And that's something that is in our scholarship guide. I think it's like twice a year, the funding cycle repeats. But check out the scholarship guide on CODOFIL's website. If you go to I think it was back here, but if you go to codofil.org, just go to the right, there's a thing that says scholarships and click that. And then Louisiana Consortium of Immersion Schools has a form that if you contact them, they'll send you a form and you can explain, here's my project, here's how I think it would help, you know, French immersion and the immersion community in Louisiana, if you think there's a way to tie it in with that. There's, like I said, the French Culture Film Grant is currently open right now, I believe, like for applications. It's made by Create Louisiana. So if you go to Create Louisiana's website, it'll have information about that. And then even if you're not talking about funding that's specific to French projects or Creole projects, I find that in my experience, and I've applied for a lot of grants and sat on a lot of grant panels, and having a heritage language aspect or strong component to a project just sets it apart. It gives it something distinct from other projects, you know. So I just think it's always a good thing to consider. Is there something I can include with heritage languages in my project? These are two sister agencies of CODOFIL. The Louisiana Division of the Arts, right, is a sister agency. They've got project grants and things like that. And also the Acadiana National Heritage Area is kind of federal funding, but it still is housed in the Office of Cultural Development of Louisiana. TMEA. All right, so like I was saying earlier, you don't have to wait until you're like perfect, and like, what does perfect even mean? Who is perfect, right? I mean, even the freaking immortel in the Académie Française that I was talking about earlier, like the first dictionary they made in the 1600s, I think it took them like 80 years to make a dictionary, and it did not include the word French. Like, you mean, like, there's no, like, what are we waiting for, guys? You know, just make a dictionary. Just do some art in French, right? So you don't have to wait until you've achieved some certain level of language to do either something in or for your heritage language. And so, you know, maybe you just team up with somebody. If you know people who are stronger in the language than you, but maybe don't have your artistic capacities or artistic experience, then you team up with them. This is, I guess, a graphic design project. It's a city planning project. But of the 4 people sort of who made this project happen, I would say there's 4 people who made this project happen. There's the person who made sure it got funded, who pushed it through to make sure that there was actually funding to make these. There was the architect who kind of did like the planning of it. And there was the 2 people on the graphic design team. And of those 4 people, only one of them is fluent French. You know what I mean? It's like the graphic design team did this amazing job. And this is a graphic design team they've made that does a lot of stuff in French. And they're learning, their daughter's in immersion, you know, they're learning with her and stuff like that. But like, why would we wait when we have this amazing like graphic design talent and they can just team up with somebody? You know what I mean? They can just work with other people who can check the language stuff. Also language consultant. So this is one of the films that won the French Culture Film Grant in, I want to say like 3 years ago. And it's called Tambou. It's all in Codofil. And I don't know the person who wrote and directed it. I don't know that he is fluent in Codofil. But if you look at the bottom, language consultant dialect coach, like they hired somebody. You know what I mean? It's a service that you can hire people for too, if that's something you're interested in. And similarly, 17-year locust, they had somebody speaking, one character speaking Creole, Haitian Creole, I should be clear, because he's a Haitian immigrant, and one woman speaking Louisiana French, and you know, you get different people for different needs. But keep in mind compensation and like that it's a process translation. This is just, I've literally had somebody call my office and be like, can you just translate this dialogue in my novel into Cajun French? It's only 20 lines. And I'm like, we don't really do that. That's not a thing that we do, but I don't know, maybe should I send it to you? I'm just like, there's stuff like, he sells it at the store. I'm like, sells what? I don't know what he's selling. I can't tell you the word for it unless you tell me what he's selling. This is a conversation we have. Anyway, so just kind of keep in mind that it is, even if you're hiring somebody, it's probably going to be a process of having conversations with them. Accessibility for non-speakers. This is just some interesting stuff that I've seen. This is one really interesting thing that David Cheremy regularly wrote a piece for Acadiana Profile magazine, and when it was printed in the magazine, it was in French, and at the bottom it just said, "You want to read English? Go to the website." So this is a screenshot of the website. You know, he'd write these kind of little pieces or whatever, but it was cool because if someone's just flipping through the magazine, poof, all of a sudden they see French. You know what I mean? But you can read it in English. You just got to go to the website, right? So I love that. Also, subtitles. I love subtitles. I'm gonna put subtitles on everything. Also, a good tip for learning. If I just did like my French class in high school, I don't think I'd have gotten that good at French. I was watching The West Wing, y'all, with subtitles, and then I would switch to the dub version of The West Wing because I'd already seen it like 17,000 times. So I knew what happened in this episode. And I was like, maybe I won't catch all the language, but you know, like subtitles on American shows. I make my husband do that all the time. He puts subtitles, French subtitles on whatever show we're watching in English. It's just a little bit of passive learning going on. So there are some examples, starting to see even stuff that's maybe like, I wasn't crazy about the lady who wanted me to translate her dialogue, but it's still cool, an idea to have the dialogue in your text be in the heritage language, but then the rest be not. You know, I was saying that Sucre does franglais, and let me be clear, they don't really, there's no rule. It's not like, so this song, they got the verse in English and the chorus in French. This other song, they've got one line in English, one line in French, 3 lines in French, one line, whatever they feel like doing, whatever's coming out, that's what they do. You know, you don't have to be restrictive about it. Incorporating into a theater production using super titles, multilingual text accompanying a visual art exhibit. Some other examples, one of the French Culture Film Grant documentaries was called Intention, and they interviewed women, and some of the women were English speaking, and the interview was in English, and some of the women, the interview was in French, right? And for those, they just put subtitles, and then in reverse, they put French subtitles and then English ones for whenever they ship the film off to France. So the typo, but also writers who blog either exclusively or partially in French. La Prairie des Femmes. I love that blog. That's fun. Ashley Wilson. But now, I'm Sade. So, like, what are your projects? Do you have any projects going on?
I'm trying to.
Go ahead.
So I'm Jolene, I'm a ranger at Longfellow Evangeline State Historic Site. I'm not an enforcement ranger, although I do have to fuss with people sometimes. But I'm an interpretive ranger, so I give tours and I do programs, and one of my main jobs is to do programming in French or in Creole. And so one idea I had listening to you is that at the parks, one of the things that Baton Rouge wants us to do is to get people to come and visit, and a big part of that is programming. And so I am a French speaker. I'm not a native speaker, but pretty fluent in Louisiana French. And so I don't know, just like maybe there's a way I can help at the park with that. Like right now, this time of year, I'm doing a lot of gardening, so I'm just outside pulling weeds. If somebody wanted to come talk to me about my project, I can help them. But or they can pull weeds or but yeah, it was we talking about the teams. So like if you know, maybe I could be part of somebody's team, and then whatever they're producing could be presented at the park, because we need programming, and we're just 2 rangers. We can't make all the programs. We need to invite people to come do their programming.
You also have the program already, the Top Chantant that I mentioned, the singing table is Joanne's baby, and it has a party atmosphere, not yet too, which is cool. She has a binder of these songs, you know, and so you can read the lyrics along. And it's like a French table, because some people like to really have an activity for a French table. Some people get nervous. There's like one French table that does Pictionary. Like, because it gives you something to do. But like, I don't know, I'm nervous about talking right now. Like, so like that's an awesome activity. It's like if you've got the lyrics with you and everyone's singing together, so it's not like you don't have to like, you're not gonna be like solo, go now, you know. Yeah. If you want to, sure, but no one's, you know, not necessarily gonna be forced to stand up in front of everybody and sing. It's a group thing. Yeah. And you can sing along and read the lyrics as you're singing. So it's an awesome French table right there.
That's an evangelism.
Longfellow Evangeline.
Yeah.
But there's another one here.
Yeah, we do an outreach at the Blue Moon every second Wednesday evening, and then every third Saturday afternoon in St. Mark.
But yeah, so you're teaching, lyrics?
No, I'm learning.
Learning, oh, well,
Yeah.
hey, come sit with us.
Because,
Every second Tuesday?
Every second Wednesday.
which is required for Christmas tree.
And those are both on codofil.org/table showing us awesome about letting you know when dates and times and stuff change, so I can generally update that pretty good.
They're like. Working on screenplay. But I wanted to be about the relationship between France and Louisiana as opposed to. My family went to Nova Scotia, but they ended up going back to France before they came to Louisiana. So.
Where are you at with that right
First draft. So.
And would you imagine it being in French or having like all in French or like having, is it historical? Is it?
No, it's fictional.
But I mean, is it set like during the time when your family was back in France or is it set today?
It's current, yeah.
Would you imagine it being all in French or some in French?
Some, I would say probably 50%. And just compare having an actual French person come to Louisiana and that give them the story. But
So in that case, I mean, I would say, even if you talk to somebody like me who I learned standard French first, but as you can see, sometimes I'm so used to Louisiana French for like mistakes that I was talking about. There's another one in here. It's canon crow. So there's a picture of a turkey buzzard. And it's canon crow. And then I was like, I don't know, what do French people call canon? And I was like, it's a buzzard in English. So I Googled buzzard and I just saw the word, I was like, cool. And I put it in there. And that's actually a slightly different bird. Like it's not the bald kind of turkey buzzard thing. That's called a boo. But I put a goose, which is like, it's got hair, it's got feathers on top. And they're like, so once again, that is the French people like, that is not what we say. It's like, okay. 68 review. It doesn't break my heart.
Can you get?
Yeah. So these are available. These Gumbo de Beau flashcards if you're just like looking for something fun. And this is another example of teaming up. So Bert Tudang, who did this, I don't know that he's fluent in French, but this is a case where actually we just hired Bert to do the art. So it works both ways. The French people are like, we need somebody to do it here. We'll pay you to be smart, because we wanted to see this project happen. But he did these awesome little pictures. So that's fatra or trigai, if you will. In France, it's called les déchets, trash. So it has the Louisiana French word and the Louisiana Creole word, they had trigai, and then trash. So c'est une plume, or a stylo in French, or international French. A macaque, un singe. Oh, my favorite. Oh, he's so cute. Shall we? Is that shall we? Love it. Kerchief. Anyway, so it's 51 words like this. And if you want, you can buy them from LCIS. We have copies in our office. LCIS is a nonprofit that supports French immersion. But also if you go to immersionla.org, then you can look up just a PDF version and print it on your computer, and it will print on normal computer paper. And it's just like side by side, so you fold it in half and it makes like a makeshift flashcard. I mean, basically we were giving these to teachers. I was like, we're giving these to small children. They will destroy at least one. And we don't want someone to have to like buy a whole new set just because they're missing the shall we, because it's covered in chocolate or something, So we also just wanted to make it a people. If you want it in pretty nice cardstock, plastic case, you can buy it from LCIS for $15. So.
That tactile experience, sometimes.
What's that?
The tactile experience of having the cards and using the cards like that. As a learning tool, it kind of goes with what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
I'm a sculpture artist, and I'm writing this grant right now to create work that I want to incorporate French into it because I've been trying to learn for so long.
Mhm.
And I don't really have a whole lot of French speaking people in a circle of people. And I want to create interactive art. And so these sculptures, I want to put the two languages side by side. And it's sort of, did you know that Louisiana's literacy ranking was at 47 for a long time? Now we're at 42, so we've got a little bit better, but you know, that's terrible. And so this is a little bit about learning to read. And when I see French, I don't see what it says. Like it takes me a long time to piece out what it says. When I see English, I instantly know. In our eye, like when we see our native language, we immediately recognize it. When we're learning a second language, it takes a while, you know? And so I want to create sculpture that puts the two languages side by side in a playful sort of way. And well, the grants due on Friday. And so I've been working on this for a long time and I don't want to get the language wrong. And that's kind of
Well, I would say there's two options. Either in your budget, you might account for a language consultant for that, right? And then you don't have to have the language right for the application, but the language consultant will make sure it's right before things are set, you know,
right,
and there for the world to see forever.
right.
The other thing is, you know, if that's totally not an option, then one nice thing about French tables is like you can go both as a learner, but you will meet people who are at different levels of French than you. You know what I mean? There might be native speakers, there might be French teachers, sometimes CODOFIL teachers love to go just to kind of hang out with Louisianians, you know what I mean? They're just like, they're from France, let's say, and they're teaching here for a few years, and they're like, oh, I don't want to just stay, like, I want to meet other people who learn French. And so you might meet teachers, you might meet, you know, so they're also, French tables are great because they're both a tool and a source of community for people who are interested and motivated and want to engage with heritage like this, so.
My other thing that I want to do, and it sort of goes along with it, is I want to invite French-speaking people to my ceramic studio and teach them how to do things with clay and learn how to talk about it in French. Because like I can talk about it, you know, endlessly, but I have no idea how to speak about it in French. Okay. And so it would be like an exchange. So I would be teaching pottery, and then they would be teaching me the English way to talk about it.
Now, one thing to keep in mind for that is like, I speak fluent French, but I don't know that I know all the pottery words. Just like I didn't know all the medical English words, because I'm not often in like childhood diseases in French, you know what I mean? Like, so I might not know the pottery, so you might have to actually find somebody who's into pottery. So speaks French. I often tell people to do that as a learning thing. So I say, like, what are you into? Are you into gardening? Go look up gardening videos in French on the internet. You know what I mean? You're into cooking? Go look up cooking videos in French. You into, you know, you did rap music? Look up French rap. You know what I mean? Like, there's like a French version of most of the things. Right. So I wonder if there's anything else ceramics.
I figured that would be the case, and I
even like a basic ceramics lesson that just happens to be in French. Yeah. That way you kind of know what he's talking about when he's pointing to things or, you know, physically doing things. Sorry.
Yeah. No, but like the exchange of knowledge and then us working on that together like that and having that sort of interview process and learning process, not just about the play and talking about art, but also us learning together how to talk about.
I'm going to talk to my coworker. My coworker is totally redoing our website. We're going to have a 5 less governmental family website coming soon. And he wants to have, I don't know if it's going to be on the first version or it'll be like version 2 of the website. He wants to have kind of like job boards type of thing. And that is something like my husband is working on his French, and I don't really want to be the one who teaches him French because I'm married to him. So, but he's a guitar player, he's a guitarist. And so he's often talking about, okay, well, maybe I'll trade guitar lessons for French lessons with somebody who wants to learn guitar, but speaks French or teaches French, you know? So there are like there's a lot of possibilities for that in various, kind of talents and whatnot.
So I'm very glad to hear you say that, because most of the time when I'm talking about that with people, they're like, What?
No, I'm gonna ask like Margaret if he thinks that job board is gonna be on the first version of the website that comes out, or if he's gonna just try and get the new website out, because it's a lot of things, this website is really huge, it's a behemoth. So I know at some point he's gonna need to just get the website out, and then some of the bells and whistles he'll have to add on in second and third versions or stuff. So I'll ask him about that, and I'll ask him if he thinks like, you know, if that kind of exchange to me, that makes sense on a job board, like looking for French tutor will trade, you know, ceramics lessons or whatever, you know.
I'm a very physical learner, and I've been on Duolingo for almost 4 years. Still, it's just like not enough.
We need
And-
more for hands-on.
Yeah.
Learners, we need more.
4 years is a long time.
So I don't know if you mentioned this on our, you probably have on the whole thing, but right here, Alliance Française regularly does a French game night.
Oh, yeah.
Or
It's on, well, I need to make sure that I have it accurately on, but if it's not on right now, it will be tomorrow. They call it Soirée Jeux, it's usually Monday evenings at Acadiana.
Yeah.
So you play a game, board games,
And
very
there's,
French.
like she said, there's a lot of French immersion teachers that are like young people who are trying to, you know, go talk to people in the community that, so it's this.
So awesome.
And it's
What is that? When is that?
It's
Monday evenings, generally, I think it's like 6 to 8 at Acadiana, the public shop.
And you have, and it's on the calendar?
Yeah, if it's not, I know this week's is on the calendar, I don't know if I set it to repeat or not, because I think I meant to reach out and say, hey, y'all, we're doing this every week, right? But they are, I mean, I'm looking at it, it seems like it's just about every week,
And I don't know if they need to be on all day on their calendars, but you can probably request to be on their email list too. And they send out for breakfast.
I work seasonal at Acadiana, and I am not in the morning, so I'm not too sure about their plans at 6 p.m. However, like in general, a ton of our regulars are native French speakers. Not necessarily Cajun French, but like a lot of them are not from here and speak a lot of French to the point where like I started driving for a little bit in front of French menus so I could like get their stuff correct. So like even if you just like go sit there and chill out, and they're all very like friendly people too, I'm sure they wouldn't mind speaking to you.
We're gonna have French tables at Festival International. We're gonna have a tent out in front of the International Center on the little green space between that and the giant flagpole. So, if you just wanna like, you're nervous about it, because you just feel the festival spirit coming over you, and you wanna go practice your French, so.
The festival spirit, the festival punch spirit.
Any other questions?
I got two.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't have a specific project going on right now. I mean, I have multiple, but they don't have to Acadian French. We're both art education students, I do well, so we kind of always have a bunch of different art projects going on, but I am a dance minor. I do well, and you mentioned, the correlation between dance, which we don't necessarily, we have productions, evening dance, spring dance, fall dance, you could look them up, and usually the admission is very cheap or free. They have taken more of a commercial route lately with dance, so I'm not sure how much they'll offer this in the future, but in the past, you could go look at videos, and they do a lot of dance videos that are to people speaking different like poetry, different words, stuff like that, and correlation with music. They don't have anything necessarily Cajun French type, but that is like an idea to step into, so to say, if you were to combine the two. A lot of dance stuff, especially in non-commercial sense, are based on like other art forms as well.
That's true, like, even just like, yeah, totally words, maybe it's not like poetry, which actually whenever I did that, and I only found out in the dress rehearsal that this girl was gonna be dancing, I was like, I have chosen another poem. This is not very danceable, I'm sorry, but she didn't sing, she's cool. But yeah, even just kind of like concepts, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even like using words as concepts.
I have a running wearable project. Okay, I really know which one I'm talking about, I'm writing about.
Oh, yeah.
But also other like textile based wearable, you know, normally I am not somebody who wants words on things, like the English decor of like pigeon, I don't get it. Like you don't need to label everything, but there is this, you know, very familiar and almost like if you know about Louisiana French words being on things in kind of a fun and playful way that I have toyed with, like some embroidery on some of my clothing, or like using words in collages that, or like you said, are concept based. And then being able to recognize the word and then have a, familiar feelings on the entire project, just because this one word reminds you of some kind of part of your life. And then also often helping my husband make his paintings, which are many, and searching for the right.
Sorry, okay, I'm stunned.
I'll show you why now.
So naming the name of paintings, that's kind of like we were saying with Jesse Bateman here.
Yes.
The names of his
Which is
iconic shows.
And we argued about it because he is always looking for, he doesn't speak French as well, he speaks it fine, but he's always wanting to name it something that feels emotive and representative of his upbringing and background. And the only time you really have word for it is like in the title, and it's like, I'm looking for a title that feels relevant to what this game is, but I don't know what to name it. So this one, what did he end up naming it? It was Lots of Roses, I think. And it's like peaceful way, or it's like trying to find the right words. And we have to, like her husband argued about it back and forth. We're like, I don't think I work by that. It was like, well, this is what I'm trying to say. So figuring out how to better find authentic phrases for things, not just like you said, looking up the words in the dictionary, going back, trying to find the right thing. It's hard to capture the essence of something when you don't know what you're looking for.
I will say though, the one nice thing about the dictionary is that those are like authentic, right? Like there's things that people actually said, so they are authentic in that sense. And like there's some of them that feel, a little bit more just like dictionary than others, obviously, but like, some of them are coming from artistic works too, song lyrics and plays. So all the and plays, they wrote out the scripts for them, and then they use that as source material for quoting things in the dictionary. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, other than that, I will say, I think I get pretty good instincts at this point in my life, but I have a committee that I text when I need to triple check myself. Like there's a committee of older people that I'm like, all right, y'all, this is what I want to say. How big is this? Yeah. Do we have one?
Yeah, right, and that's I don't want to turn to the, almost said one thing, but. Nightmare City. But if you don't have somebody to ask, like, can CODOFIL set up a Gmail inbox that's like, yes or no, is this correct? You don't need to deep dive me. I just like, is this technically correct or not? I can trust your authority on this. You're not a random on Facebook who gave me the wrong spelling.
I mean, I would love if CODOFIL to do that. I feel like my boss might get back at me. Just an idea.
Because you're my friend, otherwise.
I mean, there's that is another thing where I kind of, if you have like a regular group that you meet, which you can find, just find the top process that fits you. But there's like 7 in Lafayette. There's 7 groups in Lafayette. So you want to go to the happy hour group? Go to the happy hour group. That'd be 8 actually. You want to go to the, early morning Dwyer's Sips and Coffee group? Go to the early morning Dwyer's Sips and Coffee group. You want to go to the lunchtime group on Fridays? Go to that one. You want to go to one that's very class-like? There's one twice a month at the Southside Library. It's got PowerPoints, structure. It's not a happy answer, and I think I kind of skipped over that slide. But it is like reclaiming your heritage language is a process. And much like getting in shape, you know what I mean? It's this thing where like, there's no real attaining it and then you're totally done and you just walk away or whatever. I mean, like, you're still, even the people who attained it are still having to engage with it, you know what I mean? In order to really still be there. But, so I do feel like, I would love, and it's something that maybe we'll talk to other resources about. In the sense that you're talking about, like, if it's something like naming a business or putting something on your business card or something like that, if it's within Lafayette Parish, the Lafayette International Center will do like short things. And we will too, but like, you know. I mean, we don't want you to name your thing Joyo Noel, and then we have to stare at it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, be like, please, I know we think everything needs to be a UX, but it does not, right? You know, so like, yes, but like, Louisiana, please don't everybody in the world said this. I can't promise to respond to everybody. It's one of those things, it's like, if you say do it, then you're like, oh gosh, we don't actually have time to do this for everybody, but, I mean, give us a shot, at least, like, maybe we're not busy that day, if we just say something back. So I say go for it, try to set it, I can't promise we'll respond, but go for it.
Charge for that service?
No, we can't charge anything because we're a state agency.
So,
It's just a matter of, we just got a 6th person. And we have to do hundreds, like one person handles all the French CODOFIL teachers coming in, like hundreds of people on visas who we are like their mama in Louisiana, like everything falls apart, they call my coworker, they're like, oh. You know what I mean, that she's like their speed dial. For that, we got one person who handles all the people going on scholarships and talks, the scholarships are not CODOFIL, we call them CODOFIL scholarships. Your tax dollars aren't funding everyone going off for a summer in Canada and France and stuff like, we're not paying for the scholarships, right? The university offers a scholarship for Louisiana, or this foundation offers a scholarship. Instead of having them all in 7,000 different locations, I have a coworker who talks to all of those organizations, gets all the information, puts it all in one place, is the person you can call when you're like, I didn't understand this. I'm like, God, what do I do? And then when they're a 17-year-old, 16-year-old going abroad for the first time, and their flight gets delayed, they're calling Jennifer. And they do. You know? So it's just that it's not that ideally there would be like, you know, more staff for stuff like that. But try me, sure. Please don't kill me, boss. Love you. But yeah, try. What are you working on?
Oh, well, okay. So, one, I'm a product of the St. Anne's, like in 99 and 2000. And when I went there, I was a UO art student. And when I went there, I had what, you know, Barry calls that expat experience. And it was sort of like everything I've ever done since then, my whole entire adult life has been like Louisiana based and sort of driven toward this trip. So like all like the 10 photographs I have downstairs, they're all titled, like all my photographs titled.
Right.
And after a while, you just don't decide, like, no, you just kind of like sweet truth. This is okay, I can call it whatever I want, and maybe for everything. Usually, I call like Ashley Wilson, Russia, Clear, man, someone just this is okay. But the two most recent things. One, me and Ross account started Francophone. So that is a project getting French and Acadian and Louisiana French artists together, coordinating, making projects together, and then exhibiting them. Sort of, we're putting them during times of festivals, like Festival International, we'll have an exhibit down here in the Coca-Cola Gallery. And then in Moncton, New Brunswick, during Acadiana, will be one. And we're still working on one France, but that's one project. And then the other, because like I worked on all the films you put up there. That's what I do now, films to make it. But I wrote a screenplay about Mardi Gras revenge murder.
Oh my God.
And it came from like you know, it came from something Barry said in one of his classes, which was like, you know, Mardi Gras was often a time when you settle grievances because you're masked, and the horse plays the codiator is in, so who would notice it? Took someone out. It can just be drunk, that's why they're late. But yeah.
There's like interesting historical stuff that's inspired, like Zachary Richard's novel that came out in 2023. Like it's inspired by like a story of a historical fact that happened in Scott. you know,
Mhm.
a long time ago that someone had told him about a murder or something like that, you know what I mean, like, so.
Well, mine's kind of loosely based on like Jordan Locke Fonda, who like was my neighbor growing up because we both grew up like a mile from each other. But I heard that story all my life. In fact, I'm not old, I'm too young to remember it, but me and my sister were alive and they were searching for her grandfather. And they came down Mom and Dad's road. So there's a hint of that. I can never tell Jordan's story because it's her family story also, but
Well,
if you ever read the book, it's sort of like, it starts to touch a lot of families, it's also points. But yeah, just drawing inspiration from kind of a lot of the different pieces of where you from.
Where are you at with that film? I'm just thinking of the creative culture.
So,
Yeah, so I'm asking people like it, I've been deadlines in May, I think.
as someone that has worked on all those that want to create the major drawback and the reason why I won't enter it is you're forced to premiere at the Louisiana French Film Festival and the way film festivals work. That disallows you to premiere at more prestigious like South by Southwest or other film festivals. So like Logan, I mean,
I have heard that from multiple winners.
I mean, yeah, and also like you think $25,000 is a lot when to do a 12-minute short film to do it right, editing, color, everything. Really, you want about 75 to 100,000. That to pay your crew, like an actual decent wage and not be asking for help. Yeah.
Shameless plug, speaking of exactly short, the last meals that I worked on is now doing a run, and it's just the French Film Festival this past weekend. Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, Pat's,
Yeah, that's,
yeah. I know Pat's.
it's it'll be at the Mansion Theater on April 27th.
Random thing that I just thought of, another kind of source of creativity in the language that doesn't necessarily require you to like, you know, that can be a little bit flexible about your own ability to express yourself in that language is archive work. Like all these archives that have recordings of people telling stories, recordings of people singing songs and stuff like that. There's been a number of things like the Say Our Nassau CD that came out in 2018, where they took archival recordings of this man who was clearly awesome, but like there are old archival recordings of a cappella dude singing. It's not necessarily what I want to put on while I'm doing the dishes or anything like that. And so they re-recorded them with, you know, professional musicians in the studio and actually these, you know, musical instruments and things like that. And, so that's something where like, let's say I am a musician and I'm like, I don't even feel ready or I don't want to sit here and write a song from scratch in Louisiana French. Well, like put the archives, bro. Like, and you maybe get an archivist or somebody to help you write out words. There's some of them are all in like books already. Like Josh Caffrey has an entire book on the Lomax recordings where he's got the lyrics written down. But that's another way to produce things.
A lot of the submissions that Omelda's mine included were kind of that same thing where it was like, I am writing a rebuttal to historical French music. I was able to be labeled in this way, and this is me talking back to my song.
Caroline Hell Revolves, yeah. Really fun. She just like literally just rewrote. She was just like all these songs about like how the woman's terrible, and she's like, I'm fine. And it's clearly like they have the same title as the song, like How Lafayette or whatever. You know, like it has the same title, and she's like, I want to tweak the things that I don't like about this song, which I do too. And that's the thing. So my husband's a musician, and sometimes I write out lyrics for him. And then his bandmates, you know, also speak French and whatnot. And so he wanted to learn La Valse, Du Ma Chanson. And I was like looking at the lyric, I was like listening to it, and I was like, this guy is not Ma Chanson. He thinks the unlucky one's waltz. I'm like, he's a jerk. He's not unlucky. This guy is like, he was messing around, he got caught. Consequences, bro. You are not unlucky. And so I was like, you know what, we just tweak it, and you don't make La Valse du Ma Chanson, you make it La Valse des Ma Chanson. The unlucky one's plural. Then you can kind of just tweak a few things. It's like star-crossed lovers, And like, it's fun, like, because basically it's like, I'm not gonna get into it, but it's like, then it's like, okay, you speak a few words and they'll be about star class others and they're actually unlucky, because like, it's not your fault your parents don't like each other or whatever. Your parents don't like your boyfriend, like that's, but like, this dude was not unlucky. And so I rewrote that and I like tweaked things, and then he is going over it with his bandmate's like, that's not the word. So I was like, no, words are dumb.
Yeah. I had a friend who very progressive, queer, trans, and was like, got on Instagram, a little video playing Falling. He's like, well, hey, you know what those lyrics are? Just because I thought maybe you might want to. No, I went, there you go. Anyway, oh, gee.
There's plenty of material for what Lauren's talking about.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of opportunity for you to look at it and be like, okay.
Or
Could
like,
use improvement.
what's it, the Vietnamese, it's like, oh, poor me.
They're all
And I was just
over.
like, oh, this is, I mean, every time I hear it, this year, so okay. Because, well, you know, we know all the same people.
Yeah.
They're doing just fine.
And if they're not, it's not because they're unlucky.
Right.
And I mean, that I think what Mallory was talking about is that comes from the fact that the only people who were writing things generally were men. You know what I mean? Before the 70s, let's say, there was one woman interested over about home. And I put Lyle up there, Lyle offered and like how much I love his book. And he wrote like queer poetry in Eunice, you know what I mean? You know, and like nobody else was writing that. So he had to do it. And I love when people like just like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. Is complicated. I don't know like how I'm gonna do this exactly, but I'm gonna do this. Like this needs to be said and I'm gonna do it. And I think that's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You how many people your project?
Really helpful. I just wanted to hear what you had to say.
Okay.
But I did.